and welcome to another episode of Sisters in Christ. My name is Marina, and we have with us today Monica, Lillian, and Sylvia. Today our topic is about modesty. Can you be elegant and modest at the same time? So I wanted to start off with the definition. So Merriam-Webster defines modesty as being proper in the way you dress, speech, and conduct. And during this episode, we're going to actually speak about each of these aspects: our dress, how we speak, and how we hold ourselves. So firstly, our clothes. I don't know about you ladies, but when I was younger and my mom was trying to teach me how to dress appropriately, I still remember this vividly. We would go into the fitting room, I'd grab a bunch of things, and then every time I tried something on, she'd be like, "Would St. Mary wear this outfit?" And I thought that was the worst example possible, because she didn't have these options, honestly, is what I would always say. Do you have any examples of different things you went through, or different things that were told to you as you were growing up and trying to find the right outfits?
I actually don't remember exactly what the things that my mom would say to me. I do remember when we'd go shopping for Eid outfits, to be like, "That's too short, that's not, those sleeves are too short, this and that." But I don't remember, I have a bad memory though, so I don't know how she instilled it in me.
I think it was kind of along the same lines of not too short, not too tight, not too showing, and have all these rules. And I remember as a young child being, or even as a teenager, being kind of bummed out about it. I'm like, this is too many rules. I can't look cute and kind of still follow all these rules. But the more I grew up, I realized modesty was not just about the outward clothing, but it was really about the inward, and my thoughts, my intentions, all the things that were in my heart about it. But as a young child, your parent can't maybe pinpoint those things, but they can put rules on the kind of things that you wear, hoping that it reflects on the inside as well.
I actually took note from my mom. She really didn't put rules. She just lived the example. She was always very elegant and graceful and beautiful, but modest. And I always just looked up to her, so I took note. I think as you are all living the example of modest and beautiful, so it can be done.
I like that point, because it is true. When we see someone, and let's say, I know I've always, Lillian, you have a lot of great dresses, right? So seeing those dresses, I'm like, wow, that's stylish, yet cute, yet appropriate. And it's having those role models and seeing people dress and still be stylish is really amazing, because then it shows you don't have to wear something short, or you don't have to wear something revealing to be beautiful. And I actually found this quote by Jason Everett, and it says, "When a woman veils her body in modest clothing, she is not hiding herself from men. On the contrary, she is revealing her dignity to them." And it's exactly that point. It's not our clothes that define us, or modesty is not just our clothes, it's also how we hold ourselves. There's a beauty in being covered, and a mystery and not revealing ourselves and revealing our most private and inner parts. There's a beauty in covering that up, honestly.
Yeah, I heard once that out of all the beautiful characteristics God has given you and blessed you with, and the things that you also possess, the least interesting thing about you is your body, right? Because that is something that you might not have full control over, but all the other aspects of who you are, your personality, you have full control over, changing that and making that better.
I read once an athlete was speaking to his daughter, and I loved how he described it. He said, all the beautiful, precious, valuable things in this world are really hard to get to. Diamonds way down underneath mines of rocks, you can't get to them that easily. Pearls deep in the ocean, you can't get to them that easily. Gold. So you're more precious than diamonds and pearls. So is your body.
Right. I think we're just the world is also starting to realize that. I don't know if anyone watched the Olympics. For the women's beach volleyball team, they actually got fined because they refused to wear bikinis or short shorts, basically, and they got fined. And it actually became this big revolution of, why are they objectifying themselves? Why can't they wear shorts just like the men's team do, and just be known for their skills of playing volleyball, instead of just being on the screen and maybe people objectifying their bodies and how they're dressing? So I think the world is turning a corner, I'd like to think, at least, for outfits.
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, when the bikini came out, it was invented not too long ago in the 1950s. It's not something that's ancient. And it was designed by a French designer. And actually, when they wanted to have them modeled, they couldn't find any females that were willing to model the bikini. It took a very long time for them to be able to get someone to model it. So then when the revolution in the 1960s about women's movement and all this stuff came out, that's when it became, so it took about 10 years for it to come to America and for women to be like, yeah, I'm going to put on a bikini. But it wasn't a right away thing at all.
Right. And like you're saying with the women's movement, I was trying to do a lot of research about modesty and what it's like to be modest in 2021. And there were a lot of articles, and one of them really struck me. And it said, modesty is not meant to empower women, but to destroy them. And I don't know how you ladies feel about this, but I feel like I couldn't disagree more with this quote. What are your thoughts about this?
I think that is kind of a backwards message, very incorrect message about, oh, if you want to have power, then take it off, right? And show whatever you want to show, flaunt whatever you want to flaunt. But really, there's more power in saying, this is not the most important thing about me, and I'm going to cover up because I have the freedom to do so. I have the freedom to showcase other things in myself, and not just my body, and what God has blessed me with.
You give away your power when you remove and let it all out.
100%. And actually, to support that, there have been studies that have shown that. There was a study years ago at Princeton, and they showed pictures of females to males in different levels of clothing. And as the clothing was less and less, once they got to the point of a bikini, the males saw the females as, and they used like brain scans and all, scientific stuff to validate their studies. But basically what turned on in their brain was the same area that turns on when they see tools. So they saw women as objects and only objects. They didn't see them as, it took away any kind of human, what's the word I'm looking for?
It takes away all the good chemicals that God designed us with, that empower us with empathy and love and understanding. So that part of the brain is the primitive brain. So that's what lit up, much like dopamine. Every time we play a video game or we're addicted to something. So
yeah, right. And like we said, I don't think it destroys us. It doesn't hold us back. And a lot of the articles were kind of saying it's meant to like suppress women and keep them in the backgrounds. And I was kind of reading them and I was in shock. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, is how I felt when I was reading the articles. And it was just like, I feel like we're beauty and brains, right? So like brains and just holding ourselves and covering ourselves and holding ourselves with dignity, the way we speak is also like a big thing, right? That's a really great point, Sylvia, about dopamine and just chemical releases, honestly. And I kind of want to shift our focus a little bit now. Like we spoke a lot about our clothing, but now just within our church and within our speech and how we hold ourselves, I'd like to discuss more points about that and how our modesty plays into that. But right after this break. Welcome back to our episode of Sisters in Christ, as we're talking about modesty. So what does it mean to be modest in our speech? How would we explain that to someone? Is it the words that we use? Is it knowing when to speak at the right time? What does that mean to you?
I think if we were to hold ourselves accountable every time we spoke, I actually say this to my kids all the time, before you speak, before you feel the need to respond. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And most importantly, does it glorify God?
I like the kind, especially, because sometimes we're very like harsh and blunt, and I don't know, we always use this phrase like we shoot to kill. Like we don't really see the person that's in front of us. We just say what we have to say, and don't really know the effects of it, or the language that we use might portray us differently by the words that we're saying. And
And I think too, talking about modesty and the way we dress, especially in the church, our words to others who we don't think are modest or are not dressing the way I think is appropriate, really can do a lot of damage. Sylvia, we were just sharing a really nice story with us
Good choice, St. Anthony, actually. He was talking to us once and telling us a story about a young lady who would come and stand in the back of the church and wasn't exactly received with too much love. She was judged. She wasn't wanted. She wasn't dressed appropriately. And she reacted to those responses in a resentful, kind of bitter way. But Abuna would be so happy to see her week after week. So he'd walk all the way to the back and say, when are you ready to come talk to me? I'm happy to see you here. And week after week, she'd move up. He's still inappropriately dressed, but once she felt comfortable with him, because he received her with such love every time, she confessed and she broke down, and he is now her father of confession. He says that he loves to visit her because she's become such a faithful servant. So the remedy is always love and no judgment, no shame, as we spoke about before.
Well, that's a really amazing story that he was able to win her over by love despite what everybody else was doing. And it always brings me back to one person can change a situation into the better. It doesn't need to be a whole group. It could just be one person's actions that are consistent, because he saw her every week and still went up and saw her every week. So that's really amazing that he was able to win her by her love.
Well, that's why Christ came, right? He came for the sinners and the broken.
Yeah, we tend to fall into how the world talks and how they, conduct themselves. And actually at work, I'm surrounded by cursing all day long. And at the same time, I don't stop hearing apologies from people when they curse. Like, oh, sorry, I don't mean to curse in front of you. Or like, oh, I shouldn't say this in front of Monica because it's just not my language. And it's hard because you're hearing garbage in, garbage out. So, I mean, you're surrounded by it, and it's hard to remain, modest in your speech. But it's like, I mean, I don't speak in that way, and the influence I've had on them has allowed them to stop speaking like that in front of me to an extent.
I think modesty goes hand in hand with self-control, which I think is probably the most difficult fruit to master.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what we listen to, what we eat, self-control.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one. And even just controlling our thoughts. And I love that story that you mentioned, and it reminds us of like the whole lesson of don't judge a book by its cover. A person might be presenting themselves some way on the outward, but it might not reflect exactly how they're feeling on the inward. And to not just judge that, if Abuna hadn't been compassionate towards her and try to really see what was inside of her and bring the good out of her, he would have dismissed her like everybody else. And that's not the kind of people we want to be.
And I feel like it's important when we also, through our modesty, I feel like we elevate ourselves. And when we elevate ourselves, like you said, we kind of elevate the people around us as well, where we start to have that influence on them, where they won't speak in front of us because of just because of who we are. It's our dignity. It's that respect that we hold ourselves to, that we won't allow someone to speak to us that way or even in front of us that way. And I think it holds other people accountable as well. And little by little starts to transform people, because first they're not talking in front of you that way, and then when they can go somewhere else and then realize that's not the language they want to be portrayed with, and they change the way they speak, and it can have a rippling effect that we might not necessarily see. But what advice would you give to girls and young women growing up right now in this world of how to keep their modesty? What is one piece of advice that you would give them?
I think to just help them understand that who they are and why be modest. We had a retreat recently, and unfortunately the girls were not very modestly dressed. And one of them actually came to me and she said, "Is my shirt too short? Should I change?" And she was looking for the answer of yes, because what led to that, I told her, absolutely, go change. And so she's like, okay, can you come with me to my room and tell me in front of the other girls to change so that they can hear it too? Because her friends were dressed the same way. So something in her was like, she was torn between, should I dress the way my friends dress, or should I go the other way? So I went with her to her room, and I told her, you know, we have a good relationship. So I'm like, what is that shirt you're wearing? Go change. I mean, it's obviously not the loving way to do it, but we have that relationship. So, and she's like, okay, I'm going to change right now. And the other girls are like, what's wrong with what she's wearing? And then we had a discussion about it. So it was fruitful at the end. So just, you know, I think establishing a good relationship with the young girls and helping them understand why it's necessary to be modest.
I think I would tell them you can be modest and attractive. I don't think they contradict each other. And that's always something I'd want them to remember.
Yeah, and it's going to attract the kind of people you want to attract. If you're being modest, if you're being God-fearing, you're going to attract the God-fearing people, the people who are not just looking for a physical relationship maybe, or just are not into, you know, things that are not there for the long run, right? Because beauty is passing. We all know that. I think a piece of advice I would give is what the Bible says about, like, I must decrease and he must increase. So instead of bringing all the attention to myself all the time, really try to not focus so much on me, but on God and glorifying God. Like you said earlier, are the things that I'm doing, saying, the way I'm dressing, glorifying him? Can somebody look at me and say, oh, I know she follows Christ because the way she conducts herself? And that's what we want to aim for.
I think the advice I would give is don't be so focused on the rules around it. Focus on the why for the protecting of ourselves and for the good that will come out of it when we do develop our boundaries and learn how to respect ourselves and to teach others how to respect us.
And just to wrap up, I wanted to share a verse from 1 Timothy 2, verses 9 through 10. And it says, I also want the women to dress modestly, with decency and propriety, adorning themselves not with elaborate hairstyles or gold or pearls or expensive clothes, but with good deeds, appropriate for women who profess to worship God. And as we wrap up, I just want everyone to remember that modesty is not only in our dressing, but also in how we speak and how we conduct ourselves. And St. Paul tells us to do it also with good deeds, and just to hold yourself to a higher standard. And remember, you can be modest and attractive at the same time. Thank you, ladies.